What's up, FA Nation? Happy Friday, and welcome to the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream. I'm your host, James Grande, alongside my longtime compadre, the man in the playbook today, the man on the optimal lineups today, the man who dissected the slate like we did dissect frogs in middle school. John, how you doing, brother? Nice 9-game slate for today.
Yeah, it's a nice 9-game slate. You know, they never actually let us dissect the frogs in biology class when I was in high school. I don't know why.
That sucks.
Yeah, I didn't get to have any of those surgeries, but you know,
those surgeries. Yeah.
You know, never got to do it. So, or maybe they did. I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know.
I feel like it's definitely the latter. But 9 games today. Some juicy totals. 233 in the late night hammer. Actually, we have 2 late night hammers, 233, 238. Right. 2 of probably the chalkier games.
Different point spreads in those games.
Definitely different point spreads. Lakers 10.5 point favorites at home against Memphis team on a back-to-back. And
the Markieff Morris led Los Angeles Lakers.
The Markieff Morris led Los Angeles Lakers. I can't wait for the Morris brothers brawl to see who goes to the finals. That's how if it is a Game 7, we should just not play it and just let the brothers brawl to see.
It's an Inferno match. It's like Undertaker Kane all the way back in the day.
I agree. Actually, not brothers. In case spoiler alert, in case you didn't know, Undertaker Kane. Not brothers.
I need more clarification. Who and who isn't related. The Bogdanoviches always broke my heart already. So
I know they have. It's been a long time. Maybe one day you will be able to get over that. But we do have 9 games to get to, John. So why don't we jump into the position by position breakdown, starting at point guards. Well, there's one clear cut spend up today at the point guard position, and it is Luka Doncic. He's literally the only guy we can spend up on, considering we have an injury to Damian Lillard. We can spend up on LeBron on DK, but we'll get there at his natural small forward position. Are we spending up on Luka? I mean, the ownership seems to be there, 26%, but it's something that you and I alluded to last night. Kind of weird point total, and the pace of this game is going to be very slow.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it, as we talked about on the podcast. I mean, I know he's expensive. We know what his ceiling can be, but we saw him in this matchup already this year. Only put up 43 fantasy points in 37 minutes. They're in Orlando. They play slow. It's the first game out of the break, too. Maybe they're a little sluggish or whatever. So, yeah, I'm not spending up for Luka because there's other areas where I think we can spend up on if you want to go that direction on this slate. So while I do see the ownership is maybe a little bit higher than I would have expected him to be, and I kind of understand, why, given the appeal, given the value we have on the slate, like it's easy to spend up. I just like other guards today.
Let's talk about those other guards. I mean, we have Kyle Lowry here in the mid-tier, Jamal Murray, Lonzo Ball, and Colin Sexton. Why don't you kind of break down this next tier? Because I think it's super strong, and I think a lot of the ownership is actually going to be funneled to between these 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've seen Lowry now back-to-back, 50-plus fantasy point efforts going into the break. Easier matchups there. He's facing the Nets and Timberwolves, but, Phoenix is kind of in the middle of that, defensive DVP against point guards. So it's not as if they're like a stout defensive team against the guard position. So I have no problem there going with Kyle Lowry home against Phoenix. I'm a big Lonzo Ball guy. We talked about it on the podcast last night. He fills up the stat sheet, and I was sort of comparing him to like a cheaper version of Elf Payton, because, Elf was priced higher and they were, sort of giving you similar production. Elf got ruled out, so he's not even on the slate anymore. I think, again, in a game against Portland where, we're expecting a high total, somewhat more competitive matchup, even without Lillard, I think, you can get sort of a low-end triple-double type play out of Lonzo. I don't know if he gets the triple-double, obviously, but if he goes for like 14, 6, and 8, like, you're going to be perfectly fine at the price tag that you're getting him in. Plus, you get exposure to the late-night hammer, which we always kind of like having that run up. And then Jamal Murray, for me, again, the run that he's been on lately, I kind of, again, attributed to Will Barton being out of the lineup. If Barton is out, I think you can certainly go back to Murray. Last I saw, Barton was questionable. I don't know if you have a new update on that for me or not. So that's something I'm kind of waiting on with Murray because I love just seeing him at 1% on DraftKings, that I could almost see myself pivoting from Ball to Murray in on DraftKings lineups if Barton gets ruled out there against OKC. Because we've seen Murray go for 50 plus at times when the shots are dropping for him. And then Sexton, it's a great spot. We love going up against Washington. I don't care that Drummond's there. I don't care, that they have Love and all the other guys that are certainly going to demand some shots. Sexton gets the ball in his hands. He has a high usage play going up against just Smith defense. There's no rim protection in Washington. So Sexton for me is still a really safe play. I like him in cash games, honestly, at his price tag. And
no one's going to play him, too. So you actually could be an interesting cash play because it's one of those like leverage plays. And you get 40 from Sexton at 5% in cash games, and you're in the driver's seat.
Right.
For the value tier, Anthony Simons likely going to start. Nothing obviously official, but I mean, we saw it once. We've seen it actually multiple times this year that he slid into the starting lineup. Probably less appealing on DK or on FanDuel rather at 48, but $3,500 on DK is very hard to ignore.
Yeah, it is hard to ignore it. I mean, that's where you're getting obviously some value that you're going to need on DraftKings to get into those lineups. It's not that Simons is a terrible option, obviously, on DraftKings because it is going up against FanDuel. It is still going up against the Pelicans, but the value isn't necessarily as great. The $3,500 though is almost like a free square on DraftKings. Where you need those value plays to help you spend up in other areas. He's selling that as certainly. Kind of giving you a help out there with your lineup construction. So he's fine. It's a good matchup. They're home. We've seen him have good games. We've seen him have bad games. So, he's not safe. So I would probably on maybe FanDuel. He's probably a GPP only play. I think on DraftKings, he can be on everything.
Yeah, I think at that price tag, you just play him in everything at $3,500. I'm going to ask you, John, because it is like a top 5 player for you. You do have the jersey hanging up behind the green screen.
Yep, sure.
Frankie Nikitalina, 3,100. Are you playing him? He is, quote, likely to start in place of for paid. Do you have any shares? Or if you're playing 20 lineups, how many shares do you have?
On DraftKings, because he's 3,100, I'd probably have like 1 or 2 if I'm making 20. Again, if you look at his most recent games where he's played over 20 minutes against Cleveland, against Atlanta, obviously 2 easier matchups than Indiana poses, but 19 fantasy points in 22 minutes against Cleveland, 28 fantasy points in 25 minutes against Atlanta. And we've seen him this year when given the run, like he is capable of putting up numbers because he gives you blocks, he gives you steals, he gives you things that like guards don't always give you when they're given the run. He is a defensive first player, and he kind of helps out with some of those other metrics. He's also been good with assists. So if he starts and we can kind of trust him to play 25 minutes, if he splits it with DSJ, I don't hate it. I think there's potential for that.
Okay. Let's move over
to... It's not like a building block of my lineup, but
right.
$3,100 is hard to ignore for a starter.
And like you said, just to point out that it's not a building block, you did say like 1 or 2 of 20. So definitely not a building block. Yeah. Like we have at the shooting guard position. And I think 2 positions for me stand out today as the deepest. And I think shooting guard is the first, power forward being the other position. You have 9 shooting guards written up in the playbook.
I had to cut others out too. There was more. And I guess it's not that I didn't want to write up every shooting guard on the slate because there's plenty of them. I just really wanted to sort of narrow it down a bit, and I even left out one of my favorite DraftKings shooting guards on here. Someone I removed. It was DeMar DeRozan. $6,800 on DraftKings is a fantastic value for a guy that we were playing almost $9K for. Right. Before the break, he missed a couple of games due to a back. DeRozan's assured us that he's 100%. There's no problems there. Obviously the FanDuel pricing is a little bit higher on him. So for that reason, I kind of axed him out. He's 7,200. And there was other, values that we liked at shooting guard on FanDuel. So, but I mean, DDR, not even in the playbook, is a great play tonight as well.
I mean, it's very hard to, especially in cash, DDR is a great play, but basically, and Bradley Beal is obviously the top spend if we're spending up. And, I think that's pretty clear cut if you want to be contrarian, but every lineup especially in cash, is you're starting with CJ McCollum, right? Like that's just where you're starting your builds.
Yeah. I mean, we said it on the podcast. He's the cornerstone of every lineup. He's the first guy you put in today. With their current roster in Portland right now, because they've obviously had some changes with guys being traded and whatnot. Without Lillard on the floor and their current healthy roster, McCollum was a 38% usage rate. So, like, I mean, that's Harden. That's, the elite of elite players. Now, his fantasy points per minute lags a little bit. He's not obviously up at like a Harden level or a Westbrook level, but I mean, he should conceivably, unless they really get blown out tonight, 40, 45, 50 fantasy points as well within range for him. And you're getting him at a really good price tag. And there's a reason why our ownership has him as high as we do. We have him at almost 50% tonight. It's no secret. I'm not giving away, anything here. Like, if you've paid attention at all to anything, whenever Lillard's out, you play McCollum. It's just, the way it's been for years. So, and tonight holds true. It just happens to be in a really good spot. Now, New Orleans has been better lately, with their whole, they have Ingram back. They have Drew Holiday back. Zion's changed their team dynamic. So, they're still giving up a lot of points, but they've played better of late. But I'm still expecting, McCollum to get his. If he takes less than 25 shots tonight, I'd be upset.
Yeah, and a 238 total on to just put the cherry on top of all that analysis. But if there were other guys we're looking at, I think Donovan Mitchell, D'Angelo Russell are two interesting mid-tier options. One kind of stands out for me in cash, and one kind of stands out to me in GPPs. I don't know if you agree, but I think Mitchell you could probably play in all formats, and I think Russell would be a strict tournament play.
Yep, that's basically how I have it too. I have Russell as the strict GPP play. It's a tough matchup against Boston. He's someone that we expect to be the primary offensive player there in Minnesota. If that game is competitive, I know the point spread isn't like a double-digit spread, but if it is a competitive game, it's probably because D'Angelo is just hitting all the shots, right? So for me, GPPs, I never get Donovan Mitchell correct. So, I mean, yes, this is a great spot for him. No Mike Conley. I know the numbers don't really back it up, but it feels like when San Antonio faces like an above average point guard, like that point guard ends up like getting theirs. Like they have a pretty solid game against them. So, and they're home in Utah, so I like that as well. So for me, you can go ahead and put Mitchell in cash games. I think that's fine, just given the usage and sort of the performance that we've seen him without Conley. Again, he's just, if I ended up putting him in my lineup tonight, he would get 15 fantasy points. It's just how it's happened.
Yeah, I mean, we all have those guys, John, so don't feel bad. I think the rest of the shooting guard position is quite interesting, though, because, let's be honest. Victor Oladipo stands out like a sore thumb over on FanDuel. I don't know if you saw the ownership, John. If we want to give a peek behind the curtain on FanDuel, even at 4,600, no minutes restriction, less than 6% projected ownership on Oladipo, I think is crazy.
I think the reason for that is because he hasn't really been great, right? Like since he's come back, he's been so-so. And I understand he's been limited, and maybe I haven't looked at Popcorn Machine. I don't know if they're playing him in like 3-minute spurts or 4-minute spurts where like he can't really get into a rhythm. So the playing time that he has been somewhat inconsistent. But I mean, at 4,600, knowing there's no minutes limit, I'm expecting him now to get normal rotational run and be on the floor for a long enough time. Plus, it's the Knicks. So if anything, this is a great game for him to have no minutes restriction for. So at 4,600 on FanDuel, I'm all in there on Oladipo and GBPs. I'm not going to put him in cash games yet. I don't know if I want to go to that extent. But in GBPs, he's fine. On DraftKings, I really don't have any Oladipo tonight at 64.
Nor should you, because I think there are other options, and the other options are Marcus Smart, who is going to likely start in Kemba's stead at the starting point guard. Jordan Clarkson, who you have been very fond of recently. Malik Beasley, who has exploded on the scene in Minnesota. And RJ Barrett, who, could be poised to have a second half like he did earlier in the year. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of other options than going Oladipo over 6K on DK.
mean, you, myself, and Justin Fenceman do have a group chat named Always Pivot to RJ. So obviously I have kind of an affinity for him. It's a tough spot, obviously, knowing that Oladipo's got no minutes restriction because prime Oladipo is a really good defender. And the fact that there's no Elf tonight, like I feel like Barrett's going to maybe even handle the ball a little bit more than usual. I was encouraged by the fact that he played almost 30 minutes going into the All-Star break. He took the 15 shots. All that's great. I like the kid. I really think there's a lot of upside there. It's him and Randall. There's nobody else on that team.
Yep.
So I don't mind it. Again, $4,300 again on FanDuel. Like throw him in a GBP. I think that's fine. Again, on DraftKings, it's a little bit tougher. $5,400. I'm probably not going to pay the cost for him on DraftKings, but on FanDuel at 43 again, I think he's worth a lineup or two.
Let's move over to small forward where I think we're both on the same page with LeBron. It's kind of where we sat with Luka, where the upside is obviously there, but there are other spend ups, right, John? I mean, there just are, and
we also feel like this slate's more fair and balanced.
Yep.
Than we are spending up, and like we've been teasing, like we think there's other spots to spend up for. We like Anthony Davis. We're talking about LeBron, so we'll just say it. You and I are big on Anthony Davis tonight. For spending up, especially FanDuel at 10-6, like that's where we're going.
Right.
At 9-9 on DraftKings, that's where we're going.
Right.
So I mean, I don't feel the need to have to pay up for LeBron tonight. It's not to say you can't. I mean, he went for 70 fantasy points before the All-Star break. It's a peso spot against Memphis. It's a high game total. They're expected to win by a lot. And LeBron is giving us near triple-double numbers every night. So if he just gets an extra assist or two, extra rebound or two, while giving us 25 actual, like he can go for 60 fantasy points and be perfectly fine on DraftKings. So I'm not going to tell you not to play him. And ownership we actually have is pretty high on him tonight on DraftKings as well. So it's not that I'm not a fan of his or we're saying he's a bad play. It's just I like my roster builds without him. So.
And I think small forward is actually a pretty deep position in terms of value. And some guys that you have written up here, Brandon Ingram in a really great game environment. Pascal Siakam is an elite player for a lot cheaper than LeBron. And Gordon Hayward is someone you're very fond of. All guys in the mid-tier. I'll throw Kelly Oubre in there as well, but I'm interested in your take on Oubre now that DeAndre Ayton officially active.
Yeah, Ayton active and Dario Saric is active. Now, they're not starting Saric. Bridges is still starting, and Oubre is, playing the small forward there. But, I'm probably downgrading him a little bit. I mean, just Ayton being there as an offensive talent. It's not that we haven't seen Oubre have big games with Ayton on the floor. Again, I think he's just more maybe of a game stack play. If you're going Phoenix-Toronto, he is priced right in that mid-tier. I think at this point, I may rather a guy like Gallinari at small forward over Oubre. I think I'd probably pivot to that selection there. Again, Gallinari, a guy that I always love, didn't make the playbook today. I mean, I wrote up 15 small forwards. Like, there's just so many guys at that position. Hayward's my number one. We talked about it on the podcast a lot. It's not just that last year he tore apart Minnesota. It's not just that Minnesota's a terrible team this year. It's Kemba Walker's out. And Hayward's recent performances have been like vintage Gordon Hayward. He's distributing the basketball. He's grabbing rebounds. He's scoring efficiently. And there's just going to be additional rotational minutes there where it's possible that maybe he's even the lone guy with that second unit at times running like point guard or something. So at $7K for Hayward, I like the fact that we're looking at potentially lower ownership on him as well. All of that I think plays into my liking for Hayward there.
Let's talk about some of the value because there's a lot of it here at small forward. And Juancho Hernan-Gomez probably tops the list for not just us, but a lot of people. He's looking and fixing to be pretty popular across the industry. Trevor Ariza, not someone looking to be very chalky. That ownership probably goes to Carmelo Anthony and on the same team for $4,900. And Kevin Porter, another guy not getting any love, but he's been balling lately.
Why don't we
talk about this tier? Because I think this is going to be a very popular approach where either one or two of your small forward spots on FanDuel are consumed by one of these guys.
So I need to get your opinion here on Hernangomez because as obviously we're doing this live, news breaks. So Naz Reid is starting at center for Minnesota tonight. Does that bother you at all knowing that James Johnson could be spelling Hernangomez a power forward maybe? Or do you think how do you feel Hernangomez gets impacted by the fact that now his basically true backup who was starting next to him against Charlotte is now coming off the bench? Do you think that he's the first spell for Hernangomez, or do you think he's the backup center to Naz Reid?
Well, I think the potential is there, but also remember last game they started James Johnson, but they actually started Naz Reid in the second half, and Hernangomez still played 38 minutes. So I don't think it's necessarily impactful because they just don't have a center. They did, if I recall, they signed Omari Spellman.
Did they? I know they traded. Did they waive him? And then
but he's in the G League, so he didn't even get called up. So maybe if Spellman was on the roster, I would.
Yeah, they got Jordan Vanderbilt, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's just not someone. It's just not concerning enough to where I'm not going to play Hernangomez. I mean, he played 38 minutes. Johnson played 30 and Naz Reid played 22. I could see Naz playing extra minutes, and even if Hernangomez plays 32. 33. I mean, I think that's enough value, enough minutes to reach his 25 fantasy points, which he's essentially been at every game that he's been on Minnesota. And there's no Towns, John, so there's just so much usage to go around. A guy finally getting his opportunity. I don't think he's going to relinquish it. I don't think it necessarily impacts it much for me because I still think James Johnson is the backup center. Yes, he's the backup power forward, but they don't have anyone else to play center. So I like the thought. I don't think it impacts it very much for me.
Okay. So I mean, I still like Hernangomez as my top guy of that grouping. I like Kevin Porter and GPPs because I like getting exposure to that Cleveland-Washington game. Again, going up against Washington's fine. And then the decision between Ariza or Melo. Kind of stems down to the fact that I feel like Carmelo Anthony is going to have his hands full with Zion, or maybe he's not. Maybe he's just going to let Zion do whatever he wants and just ignores that altogether. But even on the defensive end, if Zion's defending Melo, I don't know how that will go. Ariza had a big game a couple games ago, so both of them are fine. Ariza's just cheaper.
So to quickly backtrack, I'm looking at the rotation last game for Minnesota. Hernangomez played the first 11 minutes of the second half. And the first two subs for Minnesota were Josh Okogie and Malik Beasley. James Johnson subbed for one of those guys. So just so you know, in case you want to be a little, actually he subbed for Naz Reid. There you go. He subbed for Naz Reid, James Johnson did 6 minutes into the second half. So maybe, lightens your concern a little bit. Let's move to power forward, a very stacked position where Anthony Davis obviously tops the list. I think he's my top play of the slate. I think he's your potential top play of the slate, top spend up. Rather. But we have an elite position where Jason Tatum is underpriced on DK. Zion is underpriced on FanDuel. And Julius Randle is just balling and there's no one else to get the rock in New York. How are you breaking down and assessing this top tier of power forwards?
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about Anthony Davis. He's my number one. That's, I think it's a great spot for him up against Memphis. Jaren Jackson's not going to do anything for him. Right. He's averaging 60 fantasy points against them. AD, fit him in your lineup where you can. I really, really like Randall. So the problem is I want to play a lot of Randall tonight in this matchup against Indiana. They're not a good defensive team against power forwards. He's averaging a double-double against them this season. We've seen him pop off lately. There's it's just there's a lot of other top guys here that I like. I like Zion over on FanDuel at 7,500. I like Jason Tatum a lot on DraftKings at 7,800. Both of those guys are cheaper than Randall on either site. So when I come to FanDuel, I'm playing Zion over Randall because he's cheaper.
Right.
On DraftKings, I'm playing Tatum over Randall because he's cheaper. I really like Julius Randle. feel I need the $300 or $500 savings on both sites that I just don't have in my lineup. So it's a little frustrating because I feel like I'm going to regret it, not having enough exposure to him in this spot. Because, again, he's one of the two guys on the team right now that I think are capable of really doing anything. And the last time I was this high on Randall, he had 50 fantasy points. It just, I just like him. It's a great spot for him. So don't feel uncomfortable not playing him because I don't have him in the example lineups. If you like Randall tonight, you like him better than Zion, or like him better than Tatum, play him. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
It's an elite GPP pivot for sure, off of Tatum and Zion. Absolutely. Seth Curry is entering the starting lineup for Dallas tonight. Interesting note, 4,600 over Jalen Brunson. He's starting alongside Luka and Tim Hardaway in the backcourt. Yeah. Just thought I'd throw that out there. $4,600 on FanDuel. He is a point guard.
Yeah, he's fun. I mean, I like him. If you want another, cheaper shooting guard, Terrence Ross has been playing a ton of minutes lately. Similar guy, take a lot of shots on that team. No one, I don't think is. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we have high ownership on Luka. I just don't feel like anyone's going to be playing Orlando or Dallas. So. Right.
Doesn't feel like you need to.
No.
To be honest. Rest of the power forward position, quite interesting. Davis Bertans / Rui Hachimura. I think we kind of talked about both of them on last night's podcast.
Hachimura starting too. So
Hachimura starting, which has been the case pretty much all year when they've been healthy and Bertans comes off the bench. They both play 30 minutes. I guess it's just preference at that point. We know James Johnson is now coming off the bench, but he's still $4,600 on DraftKings. That's super appealing. And I got to ask, John, I mean, does Naz Reid starting pique your interest at all? It fits because Boston doesn't start a big center themselves. Does that interest you? 4,200 on FanDuel. Naz Reid is 4,500 on DraftKings.
The thing is, I haven't seen Naz Reid play a ton of minutes at all this year. He's just only ever played 20-ish. Right. So is he going to start but then be an early sub and it's still James Johnson playing 28 to 30? And we know that Johnson at the very least seemingly does more. Again, I haven't seen enough of Naz Reid to know what he can bring to the table. I know that he's been a high fantasy point per minute play at times this year when he's been given an additional run. So that's an interesting thing. I think I'm wondering how many people would pivot off of James Johnson to Naz Reid in this instance. I know our own Sean Mitchell here in chat is already saying that he's still playing James Johnson naturally. That's if he thinks all of a sudden that Johnson's going to be the contrarian play, he would go in that direction.
You know why though, right? Enes Kanter defense, John.
Yeah.
Enes Kanter defense.
Kanter's been better defensively this year, though.
Better. Well, we've seen guys who block shots aren't always the best defenders, and Kanter's definitely been a good shot blocker. There's no denying that. He's been a good rim protector. I wouldn't go as far to say a good defender. And plus, if Johnson steps outside, is Kanter going to chase him out there?
Probably not.
So just a thought.
Yeah, it's fine.
And on the flip side of that game, Daniel Tice. Very nice price.
It is.
A nice price for Tice tonight, John.
Ooh, I like what you did there. Tice center only on DraftKings, power forward on FanDuel. One other guy, and again, I like Tice. It's a good spot because he's not really undersized in this matchup, which is a problem. Sometimes with Tice faces, he's been consistent. It's always better usually with Tice when Kanter's not there because that means he's probably going to play 30 minutes instead of playing 25 and Kanter gets his 20. And another guy that we didn't talk about here because, again, there are just a lot of people listed. And he's a center on DraftKings, but a power forward on FanDuel, Serge Ibaka. Even with Ayton playing tonight, I still do like Ibaka a lot. It's a great matchup for him. Ayton, not a good defender. Last year, we were targeting centers against Phoenix all season long. This year has been similar, even with Ayton there. So I still like Ibaka. He's $6,600 over on, where is he? On DraftKings, I think, right? Is he $6,600?
$6,600 on FanDuel. And he's $6,500 on
Okay.
DraftKings.
So it's a really great price tag for a guy that's been going for 40 plus fantasy points lately. So I'm still in on Ibaka as well. Again, center on DraftKings, power forward on FanDuel.
I completely agree. I think Ibaka's an elite play. even with someone we've targeted, like you mentioned. Let's finish it off at center. John, I got to ask, there is someone not included in your center position that I want to talk about because he's not there. And we're going to talk about him. And this was coming. This was coming.
I did it out of spite.
Jokic, if there's no Will Barton, you're standing by knowing Nikola Jokic still?
I mean, there hasn't been Will Barton lately, and he's gone for 48, 49, 53.
And he's, and then what about the games prior to that?
There's no Jamal Murray in those games.
Fair. Okay. That's what the public needs to hear. That's what the public needs to scoop.
There's Jamal Murray, no Jamal Murray. They're just different levels of play. I mean, like, he's $9,800 on DraftKings, so if you want to go burn money, go ahead, put him in the lineups. Hopefully he comes through for you. He went for 70 fantasy points against OKC earlier this year. I mean, it's possible. He's been more of a turd than he's been, a piece of gold this year. So, at least in my opinion, he's only averaging 48 fantasy points. I'm not he hasn't been great. I don't know,
Take us to the rest of your center.
He should be better. He even admitted to being fat. He gave an interview and he's like, "Yeah, I was just very out of shape to begin the season." Does he care? I don't know. He's frustrated me. Of course, a lot of this comes from some negative balance issues with playing Jokic as well. Just bad EV having him in my lineup this year. Other centers, yeah, of course, you have Drummond against Washington. Blowouts a couple games ago, kind of limited his minutes, but he still played 29 in that debut game. I think it was against the Clippers. Still had the double-double the other day. So, excuse me. I'm perfectly fine in the spot. There's really no ownership there either. FanDuel, you're kind of handcuffed. You have to pay up for center today. If you want to go down, there's Adams, there's Cantor, there's Miles Turner, but all those guys are super risky. You're basically forced to spend $8,000 on a center on FanDuel today. Whether it's Gobert or Whiteside, I like Whiteside a ton. I think I would rather lean that way in GBPs. Cash games, if you need the savings a little bit, Gobert's still going to be fine. He had 17 points and 19 rebounds against San Antonio in their first meeting. They don't have, Trey Lyles, LaMarcus Aldridge, Jakob Poeltl. They're not really going to defend Gobert. It's not like Gobert's an elite offensive player, but he's going to get his and he's going to kill the boards for them. So I like all those guys. It's just you're forced to spend up there. DraftKings, you just have a lot more position flexibility. A lot of the power forwards are also centers. You can kind of move around and get creative. But my primary FanDuel lineup tonight have Whiteside and Gobert. I got one lineup at a Cantor just in case.
Any final thoughts before we get out of here, John?
Hopefully you don't get really any more news. I kind of like how everything's currently settled. So knock on wood here that we get nothing else. No, I want Will Barton to be ruled out.
I'm cool with that. Let's get Will Barton ruled out and don't play Frankie Smokes tonight. That'll do it. 15 minutes before roster lock. Big thanks to Matt Sells for producing. Peace.